The philosopher Emil Coiren once argued that the only reason he didn't kill himself was because the harm was already done. If life had already imposed its weight on you, if you've already experienced pain, pressure, and existence itself, then ending it later doesn't undo any of it. So, by that logic, suicide changes nothing about what has already been lived. But that creates a contradiction in itself, because if it doesn't resolve anything, it shouldn't be considered a solution. Yet people still treat it as one. And that contradiction is exactly what the Summer Ghost explores in just 40 minutes. It begins with Tomoya Sugisaki, a student who on paper is doing everything right. He's academically gifted, capable of getting into a top university, and is already on the path his mother has planned for him to get there. But the problem is that none of it belongs to him. Tomoya's real passion is art. But to his mother, art is a distraction, something impractical that needs to be outgrown, not pursued. So when Tomoya hears about an urban legend, a ghost that appears at an abandoned airfield when someone lights fireworks and is only visible to those who are close to death, he isn't drawn to it out of fear. He's drawn to it because it represents a possibility, not necessarily of dying, but of stepping outside the life he feels trapped in. And that's what we call the desire to not exist. It's not always necessarily the desire to die. The desire to die is about ending life completely. The desire to not exist, it's about escaping the experience of being you, your identity, your responsibilities, your circumstances, without necessarily being attached to death itself. So one afternoon, Tomoya, Aoi and Ryo decide to test the urban legend for themselves. At an abandoned airfield, they light sparklers on the runway. As the sparks burn through the air, Ayane, the summer ghost, appears seemingly out of nowhere. After this initial encounter, Tomoya begins visiting Ayane alone, seeking an escape from the suffocating weight of his daily life. One such meeting, Ayane teaches Tomoya how to have an out-of-body experience. His soul separates from his physical form, leaving his body on the airfield as his soul enters her silent, ethereal world. For the first time, Tomoya feels weightless. The gravity of his mother's expectations and the chore of his studies don't exist here. Tomoya starts to see the afterlife as a place of absolute freedom rather than an end. He isn't afraid of dying. He's enthralled by the beauty of non-existence. It convinces Tomoya that the only way to be free is to stop being alive, that death might simply be a quieter, easier version of life. But this idea begins to collapse once he learns the truth about Ayane. She wasn't the victim of suicide, as the urban legend claimed. She was not someone who chose to die. Wanting to give Ayane a proper closure, the trio decide to search for her lost body. That decision leads them to a vast, desolate landfill. The setting itself becomes a direct contrast to everything he experienced before. The airfield was open, silent, and weightless. The landfill is heavy, chaotic, and physically demanding. Tomoya breaks into the fenced-off compound and begins to dig. The physical effort, the sweat, the dirt under his fingernails directly contradicts the weightlessness he felt in the sky, and that contrast is intentional. When he finally finds Ayane's body inside a discarded suitcase, the illusion fully breaks. Death is no longer abstract or peaceful. It is physical, confined, and irreversible. The freedom of flight was a pale imitation of life. The reality of death wasn't a peaceful sky. It was a dark, cramped suitcase in the dirt. Ayane didn't choose to die. She was robbed of a future she desperately wanted, to fall in love, to travel, and to grow. Her tragedy serves as a wake-up call. Death isn't a release for those who have a choice. It's a permanent loss of the chance to ever change. He realizes that the summer ghost isn't an invitation to the afterlife. She's a warning that death is final, while life, no matter how heavy, is still active. By seeing what Ayane lost, a future, a voice, and a choice, he realizes he still has all three. So he rejects his suicidal ideation, stating that while his life has felt like a chore under his mom's expectations, it's not over yet. Tomoya begins the story drawn toward the idea of not existing as a form of relief. But by the end, he understands that what he actually needed wasn't escape, but control over his own life. If Tomoya represents the desire to not exist, Aoi Haruno represents something more specific, the desire to disappear. Tomoya wants to escape the weight of his life. Aoi wants to escape the feeling of being seen at all. Unlike Tomoya, who's pressured to be something, Aoi is constantly made to feel like she's nothing. She's the target of ongoing bullying at school, ignored, isolated, and repeatedly humiliated. One such instance is when Aoi is seen making her way to the school rooftop to eat lunch, when her bullies douse her with a bucket of water. The water is cold, heavy, and clings to her clothes, making her look physically weighed down and small. In her frustration and drenched state, she runs towards the edge of the rooftop with the intent to jump. This isn't a planned suicide. It's an impulsive reaction to overwhelming shame. What she wants in that moment isn't death itself. It's an immediate exit from being seen, judged, and looked down on. She begins to believe that death is the ultimate form of solitude, where no one will ever hurt her again. She sees Ayane not as a tragedy, but as someone who successfully escaped. To Aoi, being a ghost means being untouchable. She thinks if I were a ghost, the water would fall right through me. If I were a ghost, their hands couldn't stop me from leaving. To Aoi, it's the ultimate shield against a world that won't leave her alone. When Tomoya asks Aoi and Ryo to help him find Ayane's body, they're hesitant at first, but eventually go along with it. In this moment, Aoi is no longer looking for her own exit. She's actively working to give someone else a proper rest. By helping Ayane, Aoi begins to see the value of agency. She realizes that the dead have no power to change their circumstances, whereas she as a living person can still affect the world around her. Resilience isn't about the pain disappearing. It's about deciding that you're worth protecting despite the pain. The final perspective comes from Ryo Kobayashi, and it reframes everything that came before. If Tomoya represents the desire to not exist, and Aoi represents the desire to disappear, Ryo represents something neither of them fully understand: the desire to hold on. Unlike the others, Ryo is not imagining death as an escape. He's facing it as a certainty. He has a terminal illness, and his time is limited in a way that is immediate and unavoidable. This changes how he engages with the idea of death entirely. For Tomoya and Aoi, death is hypothetical. It's something they can approach, interpret, or even romanticize. For Ryo, it is not a concept, it's a deadline. This difference becomes clear when Tomoya and Aoi become obsessed with finding Ayane's body. Ryo's frustration boils over. Unlike the others, he doesn't have the luxury about wondering about death. While both of them are trying to understand death, he's trying to delay it. And that contrast exposes something important. The ability to consider death as an option in itself is a form of privilege, because it assumes you have time to think about it, time to approach it, and time to step away from it. Ryo doesn't have any of that. This shift becomes more concrete through Ryo's personal goal. He wants to live long enough to see the cherry blossoms bloom one last time. It's a simple objective, but it carries weight, because it shows that even in the face of unavoidable death, his focus is not on ending pain, but on experiencing something meaningful while he still can. Ryo makes them see that what they're searching for in death, relief, peace, and distance, can only be meaningfully experienced while they're still alive. Because ending your life might stop future pain, hardship, or disappointment, but it doesn't erase what you have already been through. What it removes is a possibility. The possibility that someday life might stop feeling this heavy. The possibility that you could meet people who make life feel a little less lonely. The possibility that the version of you 5 years from now will look back and feel thankful you stayed through the nights you were convinced would break you. And I know how frustrating that sounds when you have been struggling for so long that people telling you to hold on can start sounding hopeless. You wake up already tired about tomorrow. You get through the day somehow. You go to sleep hoping things will feel different in the morning. Then the morning comes and it feels exactly the same again. And after a while you stop asking how do I get better and start wondering what's the point of constantly trying if nothing ever changes. And I think this is exactly where the idea of ending everything starts becoming tempting. That's what the summer ghosts understand so well. A lot of people think they want to disappear when they really just want some relief. Relief from the routine that's draining them, relief from expectations they never chose, relief from people who only seem to like them when they're easy to deal with, relief from being stuck in a life that keeps going nowhere. Sometimes the darkest thoughts don't come from wanting death. They come from not knowing how to change your life. And when you can't imagine change, escape starts sounding reasonable. But there is a difference between wanting your life to end and wanting the way you're living to end. That difference can save people. Because maybe you don't need to disappear. Maybe you need boundaries. Maybe you need distance. Maybe you need honesty. Maybe you need to disappoint a few people. Maybe you need to start over. None of those are easy, but they're still options. And as long as options exist, the choice to exist still does too.